Okay, so we should be live. And that's just the Zoom that's showing that notification there. Sound should still be working, but let me know if there is any issues with the sound. I'll go ahead and check it myself as well. Okay, and looks like it's working. Awesome. Yeah, good afternoon. Awesome. Okay, got a confirmation that the sound is okay. I got a complaint in a previous live stream that the chair was squeaky. So if there's any issues with that, you can let me know about that too. Yeah, so I hope everyone had a good week, and a lot of the things that have been clearing, over the past months, it's getting better. The energy is maybe getting a little bit lighter, it's less heavy, and hopefully you're feeling better. Okay, so today is part 4 of the creation template. So we're going to continue talking around the same themes, just delving into them more, but I'll probably give the lives a different title. A lot of the times the lives, content from the previous lives will blend into and kind of build a foundation for what we talk about in the next week to come. So we've been talking about developmental levels and kind of combining it with manifestation. And here's the thing, is that that model of developmental levels, so ego development, it doesn't imply anything about manifestation. I went and found the original paper this week and read a bit of it, and especially started reading the part on the magician level. And so it's talking more from a non-duality perspective, not necessarily a perspective of manifestation. Although that probably does help in manifestation to be able to detach from your thoughts, to not identify as your thoughts. However, you don't necessarily need to be accessing like that high level of development in order to manifest. So our reality is based on templates, narrative stories that our consciousness projects and reinforces. And this is the tricky part, because there's the I, and there's the ego, and there's this construct, there's narrative of this continued person or character, and that is not necessarily the same as just pure consciousness. So it's not really the character that is creating reality, but the character is created as we experience reality, but it's our consciousness that is creating reality. And so we want to get on the same page and have this unity, have this integration within ourselves and within our experience. Because when you have that division between this character and this perspective of how you experience reality and who you truly are, it's challenging. We accept templates from our experience and forget our ability to morph, shift, and create new templates. And of course, we say the word you, your, we, and those can reference the I, but of course we're using them in a loose way. So like I said, there's the I, there's the story, and then there's consciousness. So I'm not being specific about the language that I'm using here. And this is the tricky part, because as long as the character that we're playing is attached to those stories, they're going to be having a really hard time trying to manifest, trying to morph and shift and change the reality they experience. If our reality is predicated upon past experiences and cultural input, is it really reality? Yeah, so that's referencing the part of our experience that is filtering reality, filtering pure, unprocessed reality. So we have pure, unprocessed, undifferentiated input that we receive and translate. So we basically translate that unprocessed raw data via our senses, and then we categorize that data into mental models and like these mind maps or these mind webs, which contain all these like conceptual categories, which are really deeply interlinked. And everything that we experience as we create these mental models is filtered through those models, so we're no longer directly experiencing. So there's different non-duality teachers who talk about that specifically. And Luminal Mind, if you want to check the chat, the replay chat, Luminal Mind's got some suggestions for breath work. So this series is about stretching our mind and imagination to consider and accept different beliefs about the reality we experience, and even creating new beliefs about what is possible. So a lot of this information, it's available. It's not as if this is the one place that you can find this information, and I'm drawing from different sources. But it's important to come back to and remind yourself of it, and also even have some community around discussing it, and that helps us to remember it and put it into practice in our lives, because what always happens is we get busy and we forget about it and we don't focus on it on a consistent basis. So just talking about it and giving ourselves a chance to process it, because as you grow and as you experience life, you're getting more and more complex models. So now you're going to be able to filter information that's either new or it's familiar, so it seems old. You can process it in a different way, and you also have the chance with an expanded perspective to be able to choose, you know what, there's some models that I want to drop here. Luminal Mind shares, I bring to mind a personal wisdom counsel of souls that have long passed that still influence my everyday goings on. Nice, yeah, so that sounds somewhat similar to what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about manifestation from the perspective of Abraham Hicks. So there's that connection that they're drawing upon for that wisdom. And this is really interesting because it is trans-rational. And so, of course, we're drawing from a paper that, well, it looks at all the different stages of development, but it's definitely from a more rational viewpoint or perspective, or the information is more palatable from a rational perspective. And this is the tricky part, is integrating those different perspectives, because oftentimes we are operating at different developmental levels at different times in different areas. So that is part of our process, is that we are integrating those different perspectives. And even as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that, do I really know what manifestation means? And what does that mean if I'm manifesting? Sure, we can talk about, the science behind it, but how does that integrate into a model or theory like this? And is it reasonable for us to make certain assumptions about how we integrate that? $250 FMX. But if we don't ground ourselves in non-influenced mental processing, the outcome or our understanding will be tainted as opposed to having a fully clear mental, I'm guessing, processing or understanding. So that's really mentioning clearing out your thoughts and really questioning your thoughts and questioning those assumptions that happen when we have that processing that happens. So that's a bit of deconstruction that's happening there. And so we basically have to build ourselves up and fully develop ourselves, and then that allows us to deconstruct those models. I love that. Transrational, beyond the intellect, another process that has atrophied in our ongoing development. Yeah, so the chart that I showed you, starting from the part 2 in the creation templates, we had the pretty much 3 categories, and then in between the first and second columns there was a section where it divided the 3 up into pre-rational, rational, and trans-rational. So I'll go over that more in the slides today. And that wasn't developed by that creator. I saw a similar view. I also found when we're talking about if you're at different stages and what your relationships will look like within the same developmental levels, or trying to date people in different developmental levels, I found the reference for that. So the rational and transrational and pre-rational, those were in a chart they had as well. So I don't know exactly the original source of that, but I will try and maybe make some separate videos and link them back to the original slides. Okay, I'm going to try and stay focused on the slides so we can get through them. But you guys can continue discussing those ideas in the chat. Okay, so I found an article in Forbes that was very relevant to this discussion. It's called "The Psychologist Explains the Phenomenon of Reality Shifting." And I read that and it made me think of parallel realities. And this was very similar to the concepts we discussed in the Creation Templates series. And I've heard someone say parallel realities can show up in dreams. I was joking about this at work, in the side of the office where people are open to talking about these kind of things. And I've been having these different dreams lately where there's magic or there's these fantasy elements, and sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's scary. Like I had a Hogwarts style dream where I could do magic, but I was testing out my magic and it ended up being very harmful to other people, and there's a lot of dark stuff going on in that reality. So like, you know, the element of magic, there is that amount of leverage to that. So if you have a low level of development, having a magic, for example, if you imagine like the Harry Potter series, it's going to be disastrous. Things are just going to get thrown into a level of chaos that is really damaging and destructive. So if you think about the 3D, and then you've got the polarized 40 positive and 40 negative realities. So if they have 40 negative reality or dimension, that's going to reflect that. So in 40, things are a lot faster and they can get out of control and get out of hand really quickly. I had other dreams where there was a meeting between like people on land, or I guess humans, and Lemurians. And so the Lemurians came out of the sea and they brought their whales with them, and I was pretty scared because of my experience with whales. I don't remember if I mentioned these dreams before, but I had some other dreams that were quite fun and really, really interesting, really nice. So yeah, so these kind of realities can have this magic or fantasy elements. And I think it's possible, you know, those dreams could be parallel realities that my soul has experienced. And of course, you can, there's the question, how much do you want to try and escape the current reality that you're experiencing or living? And how much do you want to invest your focus into what's happening now? Because you're here for a purpose, and part of that purpose is kind of discovering what you came here to do. So, you know, yeah, there's possibilities, but for me right now, what I'm feeling strongly is focusing on what's happening here and what's happening now, and how can we make the best of it. A psychologist explains the phenomenon of reality shifting. Reality shifting refers to a practice where individuals attempt to shift their consciousness or awareness to alternate realities or realms through various techniques, often involving meditation, visualization, scripting, and intense focus. So this was a lot of what I was imagining when I started this series, using these kind of techniques and imagining this kind of reality that you want to shift into. These alternate realities might be based on existing fictional worlds, personal fantasies, or entirely new creations. So there can be this level of closeness, like how close do you want it to your current reality. So they say, yeah, there's no scientific consensus whether individuals can shift their consciousness to alternate realities outside of dreams or mental constructs. Reality shifting is primarily seen as a subjective and personal experience of imaginative play rather than a literal alteration of reality. And that was the question I was thinking about this week. Like, how true is this? Like, how true are the concepts that we're trying to apply here? And of course, that depends on your paradigm and your perspective. Individuals may prepare to shift realities using mindfulness, meditations, subliminal audios, and affirmations, and by creating a detailed script of the desired reality they wished to shift to, including sensory details, emotions, and specific events they want to experience. So you can see here, this is very similar to kind of the idea of creation templates. Here are two examples of commonly reported reality shifting methods. The Alice in Wonderland method. This involves mentally visualizing oneself falling down a rabbit hole into a different reality, often using meditation or relaxation techniques to aid the visualization process. And there's the elevator method. This involves imagining oneself in an elevator traveling to one's desired reality located on the top floor. As the elevator ascends past each floor, practitioners focus on intensifying their energy levels. When the energy reaches a high enough level, the elevator doors open, allowing access to the desired reality. This sounds kind of fun. Popular desired realities include the Harry Potter world, Shadowhunters, Star Wars, anime universes, and so on. Yeah, so that sounds like quite fun. And I imagine that some people who try this out don't even take it that seriously, because it's not, you don't have to imagine it as real to imagine it. So like, this is the whole idea that we discussed at the beginning, where you could just release the resistance to where you're saying like, this is not true, this is not real, so there's no point in doing it, and just enjoy and experience it. I'm using the Alice in Wonderland method. Yeah, sounds fun. Isn't this what we do whenever we imagine? Yeah, absolutely. We all have bad programming. I'm working to take control over my mental programming, learning to define my own terms and conditions. Awesome. Yeah, this week, it shifted for me, where my paradigm and mental framework was quite narrow, and I was feeling upset because I'd been looking at properties around me, like just apartments, and it's like, oh, I can't afford anything that isn't in a bad area. And so my coworker started looking at places in Texas, and they said, wow, look at how affordable that is. And it was a nice thing to do, because it made me feel better and feel like, oh wow, so like I have been doing a good job of, you know, working towards my financial goals. And it's not necessarily like that I've been irresponsible. It's more that if you want to live in a certain area, of course it's going to be a lot more expensive. So that's kind of the realization that I had, where kind of going from feeling like a failure to feeling like, oh no, I'm doing pretty good. And that's okay. And also thinking about different options, like I don't have to buy where I live. I could buy somewhere else and even have maybe a rental property, and use that to travel around. Like there's different options, and as soon as you start to open your mind and think about different options, that expense for you. I was also thinking about, if I want to meet people, like where would be a good place for me to meet people who have similar interests. And I was thinking about that, you know, places that I could actually just drive and spend a weekend, and also means to connect with people. So I messaged someone on a Facebook hiking group and arranged to go hiking. We arranged to go hiking tomorrow. So, you know, there's opportunities that do open up to you when you start to think and see past your limitations. Can I rent from you for half price? Just kidding, the coworkers put me up to it. Yeah, I got that you were kidding about that. But actually, it would be probably less expensive if I was going to be having a place in a less expensive area. Teamwork makes the dream work for some. Yeah, I mean, we are working as a team to help each other grow spiritually, and that person that you're referencing that I made a video about that I posted Friday, that person existed in my life to help me to grow spiritually, and also to question my personal narratives about relationships. There are so many options. This is a good sign of open-mindedness. I'm ready to change the entire game. That may include inviting in roommates. Yeah, I was thinking about, oh, maybe I could move. Not that I want to move, but I thought, I could go and spend like a month or a couple of weeks in a different place and expose myself to different things. And then I got a little bit scared about doing that. But that's good because it can get you out of a rut. Because you kind of end up thinking like, no, I only want this, and you have very limited paradigms or ideas about like what you want. But what you really want, it can show up in different ways. Yeah, looking for win-wins. Solving problems together. Yeah, it was really nice for someone who I worked with to encourage me in that kind of unique way where I started to think about different options and possibilities. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today, I referenced earlier, talked about base assumptions. So in this discussion, some of the assumptions that we're making and comparing manifestation principles versus ego development. And we've been talking a lot about ego development, and I've been thinking, okay, how do these concepts tie into these creation templates and manifestation principles? So I wanted to talk about manifestation materials for a little bit, and then I have the developmental levels paper and applications that I found. So we're going to continue talking about manifestation and ego development. I have some writers that I want to do some summaries on. So there's going to be more lives that we're going to continue on the same topic. I'm just going to use a different title for them. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the concept of the magician that we found in here. And so there's lots that we can talk about that we brought up with the spiral dynamics and the developmental levels paper. Okay, so part of the assumptions that we're making is that we create our reality. So I started off in part one with this assumption, and I wanted to point out that it is an assumption. And we look at who's the I, the story of you, and is that the entity that creates reality? Because what you end up having, you've got these gurus or these teachers who are sharing this kind of content that's really popular now, and people are listening to it, and of course you can go ahead and apply it, but maybe they're struggling with it because there's some areas in their life that they haven't developed yet, that they need to develop, and maybe they say, oh, this doesn't work, or this isn't true, but it is a matter of perspective. What are you working on right now in your life that you need to focus on or you need to work on? So we're talking about these principles, but recently I thought about what do I want in my life and how do I get there? And one of the things was, you know what, I could have more flexibility and more money if I try applying for a new job in the same field that I'm in. So not trying to get rid of my job, not trying to dramatically change my life, but I could have the positive benefits that I want if I approach it from that method, right? Because you could say, well, I just want to quit my job, which is fine, you know, depending on the scenario you're in. But, you know, there are options. There are different ways that you can get closer to where you want to be by taking these incremental steps. So we've got the belief in yourself, and that's really, really powerful, that the paying attention to paradigms. And then there's also the perceived actions, because you can argue that you don't have free will, that the body moves on its own and the thoughts arise, and you only perceive having control, like that's edited into your reality. But at the same time, there is a level of control that you can apply. So you can argue about that, but it's helpful to be able to fully experience reality and see reality being edited and perceived and constructed and deconstructed in the present. And it's also helpful to engage and assume responsibility, especially like depending on, you know, the different areas of the developmental levels that you're working on. So I'm bringing up these assumptions because I'm saying here that the ability to manifest doesn't require high levels of ego development. It does not require the top levels. But at some point in your life, you likely have to develop yourself, develop those layers, develop those skills. So that can show up later. So maybe you could have an incredible manifestation and then it feels like everything's falling apart. Well, oftentimes things fall apart because there's things that we have to learn and develop and work through. And of course, the question is, why do we use this level, this model of developmental levels? And of course, this helps us when we are struggling with certain areas, we've got weak points, areas with reoccurring problems. So this is very much like when we talked about one of the lower levels in terms of the relationship chart. There was this cycle of makeup, breakup, or like marriage and divorce. And that was particular to that level of development. So you recognize that, and that starts to help you identify, okay, what do I need to do to help myself go to the next level? I see what's characteristics of the level that I'm exhibiting their characteristics of, and I see the differences between that and the next level, and I try to embody those characteristics. Of course, oftentimes when you're there, you're not going to be seeing that fully, but you might have some sense, or some people around you might have some sense of that's where you need to go. So this helps develop a roadmap for consistency. And awareness of these levels helps with, the different issues in our lives. So if you're dealing with roommates, or like even identifying, do I want to be roommates with these people, to being able to recognize what characteristics do they have, what questions could I ask them about their life that will give me clues about their mentality. And recognizing those things helps you to recognize, oh, can we solve these kind of issues, or are they not solvable, or do I want to enter into these kind of agreements or this kind of situation. And so what seems to happen is that these kind of practical problems can basically become a sinkhole for your time and energy and resources. So that's why it's good to address them. Part of being able to grow in really an upwards way, in a really constructive way, is being able to identify and recognize, these areas where we could resolve things easier rather than like this very complicated, difficult way. And like we mentioned last time, Lumina Mind mentioned how that spiral, we move in this positive upward spiral and we come back to the same issue that shows up maybe in a slightly different situation, and we're able to deal with it easier because we're able to recognize, I see what's going on here, and an expanded consciousness has more options. So I'll probably have a little bit of time to go over the paper on levels of ego development today. I just wanted to go over some of the key points that I thought were relevant just for today. We'll probably go more into it later. So this paper, it hints at the ability to deconstruct reality in the magician stage, where you pull apart the narrative of the I and the experiencer. So this paper does not imply the ability to manifest, but we are making that connection here and that assumption. So I'm not saying like this paper means this. I'm saying like this is an interpretation. So we can be aware of our assumptions and use these ideas and recognize they're not representative fully of reality. Regardless, papers and journal articles, they're still models. They're still not fully representative of our reality, so we're always making better and better models. Okay, so moving on to manifestation principles. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this, and we'll probably do another live where we look at different ideas about manifestation. I realized that I thought I knew what manifestation was. It reminds me of when I realized, after being in the church for several years, I realized I don't know who God is, and no one else knows who God is. Like, no one knows. And it's like that realizing, oh wait, like I thought I knew, but do I really know? So this it deserves, another closer look, because maybe your awareness has grown where you're able to apply more refinement to different ideas and look at them closely and add more sophistication to the ideas that you're listening to or receiving, and you're able to add more of your own other influences and experiences to that information. So I'm going to link the specific video that I'm have notes on here in the description. I'm watching the video, and so here's this lady called Esther Hicks on stage, if you're not familiar with Abraham Hicks, and she's channeling this entity called Abraham. So it's kind of an interesting name or how that works, and so she calls this entity Abraham Hicks because it's the entity Abraham being channeled through Esther Hicks. She goes into this meditative state, and then she starts speaking in this very different way. And she's very popular. and it's very interesting watching, because I see here there is this transrational consciousness that we see in the harmonized, sanctifying, complete stages. So those are the top stages and the levels we looked at in the previous live streams. And she's talking to this audience who are raptured, trying to understand what she's talking about. It was very interesting, like watching the video and seeing that play out after we talked about it in the live stream. So she talks about this vortex of a creation. She uses this language, which it's this transrational language that's difficult to connect to, especially on a rational level. Right, so someone who's not familiar with trans-rationality is going to look at this and say, this is pre-rational. Like, they haven't made it to the rational stage. And this will likely connect with people who are in the pre-rational stage. And maybe they'll go through a period where they apply some of this and it works for them, but then there's circumstances in their lives that show up that force them to develop through these different stages. So, of course, you know, in this kind of video, they're not going to be talking about ego development levels. Yeah, so if you want to, you can look in the description and watch the video, and you have to decide for yourself whether what she says is true or not. And that's the thing about trans-rational. It's not something that you can apply rational principles to say, oh, well, that's true or that's not true, right? There's the scientific method. You really can't apply the scientific method in the same way. I've been trying to decode manifestation principles for a while. Manifesting is not about attraction so much as it was incarnation. Manifestation describes a personal, co-creative relationship we each form with life and spirit. It takes a unique form for each of us. In effect, we each need to find what works for us. Yeah. If you listen to someone like this, and it all sounds like nonsense, it sounds very incoherent to you, you know right away that that's not helpful to you, right? That's not what you need to be working on. So everyone finds what's helpful to them and what they need to be working on. And different people are going to express things in different ways that help us to understand. So, you know, regardless of what information is out there, what we need to be able to process and understand that, it's going to be different. Okay, so she talks about this vortex of creation. So this is one of the ideas that's very abstract. So when we talk about this vortex, it implies your creative power. And it's visible in the non-material, as we would expect it to be. So she talks about tuning yourself to a vibrational frequency of all that you are, implying that you're more than just the physical. So if you just have a small snippet, it's not going to make a lot of sense. Sometimes you have to watch more than one video, quite a few videos, to put the pieces together. At the time in my life when I started listening to Abraham Hicks, the main message I got was, stop worrying, just relax and try to be happy. And I could not let myself relax and be happy. There was this constant survival mechanism that said you have to be anxious and worried because that'll keep you on the ball, give you better performance. If you're not paying attention all the time to anything that could possibly go wrong, you're going to mess up And there's this like survival mechanism that was activated within me, and I could not relax. So I listened to Abraham Hicks a ton, and that helped me to start to believe that, like, yes, you could give yourself reason to just be happy in the moment because the sun is shining. Something simple like that. And that can really improve your well-being if you have like that deeply neurotic habit within you. So the vortex is this place where all dreams, wishes, and hopes are held. So I'm listening to this, I'm thinking that sounds like positive 4D or the 5D dimension. So we talked more about dimensions in a previous live stream, shifting like from the 3D to the 5D. It's this eternal pool of well-being. And so what she's implying here is that we have our experiences, and we have these positive experiences, and we say, I like that. And then whatever we like goes into this vortex. And as we align to this vortex, that's when the things that we like show up in our life. So it's this really simple model of manifestation. And a lot of the times it might be a little too simple. So it's this reality that you can't see, but you can feel. And as your sensitivity grows, you can feel it more. So I've been experiencing this where, you know, there's this attachment to like, if I just have this beautiful house and all this money, I'll be fine. And I've noticed how this has shifted where I don't necessarily want that right now. I want to experience the process in between, because like you end up at the end result and then it's like, well, I didn't get to experience kind of those fun things that you sometimes experience when you don't have a lot of money. Like the kind of things that you wouldn't do if you had a lot of money. And so it shifted for me. So I thought, well, that desire for that house, that reflected, I want to feel secure. But then I realized, oh, well, if I feel secure, you know, there's other experiences that I might like to have as well. So, and that's the interesting thing. Like a lot of the times our desires can reflect not just a desire to have a specific thing, but a desire for security, for feeling secure. And a lot of what Abraham Hicks talks about is you need to focus on feeling secure, and then things will show up in your reality that reflect that security. So she says, what we have is this opposite conditional approach where if I have the house, the expensive house, then I'll feel secure. And she says, you're going about it backwards. So she talks a lot about vibrational frequency and reminds us that everything that we perceive as being real is frequency. And this is a lot about how I thought about it when I was trying to figure out, like, who is God? Because from a Christian background, we talk about God a lot, but I'm sure we can understand who God is better than just God. Just like God is what God is, and that's it. We don't question it. And every atom is mostly empty space, and it's got these electrons spinning around it. They're not even spinning. These electrons, they have, I think it was like the Bohr model, and then we have the next model where there's probability spaces of where the electron might be. So I was like, oh my gosh. Yes, of course, these models work for our science and our tech. But if we really think about it on a deeper level, like, if it seems solid, like reality, like this desk seems really solid, but even our scientific models show that it's not solid, which is, it's really strange and really, really weird. And that's really how I thought about it. Like, if God is everywhere, then God is part of this consciousness, or kind of like this mystery around what reality is made out of. Okay, so back to the vortex. So when you're in the vicinity of the vortex, you can feel the deliciousness of it. So, and I've been feeling that. You can have, some days I've been, especially in like the past couple months, I've been upset and miserable and just be like, I don't want to be here. I don't like it here on Earth. It just feels disgusting and gross and heavy and depressing. And I feel so much better this week. And when I'm feeling down, the mind can go, you know what, this is why you're feeling that way. It's like, oh, you don't like your job, and you don't like where you're living, and if you had more money, you'd feel better. But like that's a story, and those are false assumptions. So I can have the same circumstance, but feel really good. And you don't always have control over kind of the energetic weather that's going on around you. But whatever energetic weather is happening, you can embrace it, and you can detach from the thoughts that are providing resistance against the kind of thoughts that could feel good, like just enjoying being outdoors, enjoying the sun. And of course, being out in nature really can help with detaching from like that resistance where you can't be present and just enjoy being in the moment. And when you are all stressed out and you just have some excuse to be present in the moment, like that feels really good. Okay, so she's saying the entry point for this vortex is somewhere between hope and belief. And this is really important, because whether the vortex is true or not, we all need some hope and belief, as much as we can muster. If we can't muster any at the time, you just gotta like hold on through that and just let go of any hope or any belief. Sometimes we go through those kind of periods. But being able to hold hope and belief, it can bring about possibilities, opportunities, and beauty. I see people who, they have so much nihilism and cynicism and bitterness in their lives because they don't have any of this hope or belief. And it really, they lose like that life force. The nexus of hope and belief is press on, persistence, dedication. There is an effortless ease, but with steady forward flow available. Yeah, that hope and belief can get you unstuck. Okay, so you'll be swept into the vortex when there's not enough resistance to hold you out. So she talks about clinging to resistance with some thought. And I talked about how I didn't believe that if I just let myself enjoy life and be happy, that I would survive, that I would be okay. I had this fear that I would continue to experience that negative anxiety about money that I grew up with. And there was all this anxiety and worry about not having enough money, and that you have to work really hard to get out of a situation where you're vulnerable and don't have enough money. I was introduced to this idea from a young age, preteen, where you have to have enough money or you'll get stuck in this kind of situation where it's going to be a constant struggle. So that was really difficult to let go of. And of course, when I was in university, that was a good place to start to deconstruct that, because I had momentum. I was in a computer science degree, so I had some momentum towards being able to have that kind of security. It wasn't over yet. I still had a ways to go, but it was a start. And that's the thing, like as soon as you start, you know, if all you do is try to manipulate energy and you're not taking steps in the material reality or taking action in the material reality, you can get stuck in certain paradigms. Sometimes taking action in material reality can help change those paradigms and ways of thinking. And I noticed that it changed. I had less of this kind of victim and helplessness mindset the closer I became to personally having financial stability in my life, where I was able to have like more financial independence. And I wasn't stuck being financially dependent, which can be a problem if you end up having to play this game where you can't fully be yourself. You have to play the game of the person who is providing you with what you need. Okay, so she talks about like when you desire something, and there's this gap between when you desire something and then you experience that desire in the physical. We're very familiar with, you know, all those reasons, like, oh, I can't, yeah, I want that, but I can't have it because of these various reasons. And like this makes me think of the levels of development again. Why is it important to have the belief, to have the visualization and the focus and the understanding that your focus can change your reality, but also the action? Because I think the action is what helps you propel you through those levels of ego development. Action is, in particular, very closely associated with that achievement level. After the achievement level of ego development is the understand. So, and that's developing that holistic perspective. And each level of ego development gives you different paradigms, frameworks, and skills. And so what I think is that your full ability and your full potential hinges and rests on your ability to access those skills and insights and perspectives that you develop through the developmental levels. So this gap between what you desire and what's showing up in your life, it continues as long as you have more resistance than belief or expectation about the subject. And this could show up as, well, why would I take any action towards it? Because if there's no way this is possible that it can happen. I watched a video that Haley Khalil did, where she's a model and she's most well known for being a social media influencer. And of course she was married to a football player. I believe it's football. So she has lots of money. But she told a story about how when she first went to New York City, she stayed with a friend in a tent, and she was didn't have any money, was so excited about being there, and one day wanted to live there, and now has this insanely expensive apartment in the heart of New York City. And she talked about how she's so proud and so excited that she manifested that. And I thought, what do you mean you manifested that? Didn't you have this long process of working to get there? And I thought, well, if we want to talk about manifestation, that's appropriate to say, apply it to her situation. Because she had the hope and belief, and she took action in the material world, because there's the belief that, well, I might as well not take action towards what I want because it's not going to get me there. That is a limiting belief, and oftentimes we don't even recognize that limiting belief. Well, let's just take a little bit of action, right? One kind of action that I'm taking is on LinkedIn, they have courses for programming languages. So I'm taking some of those courses. Of course, my work, I have a membership, a 3-month membership for LinkedIn through my work. So I'm actually not paying for it, but I'm excited about that because, you know, each little video, each little part of that, that's a small step that you can take every day. And so I have this vision of developing more skills and becoming more valuable and getting the kind of job that will give me the kind of lifestyle that I want. Okay, so I talked, if you go back to the first video in this set, part 1, I talked about being general and specific, where you can get general, where you're just focusing on developing a good feeling. Of course, you don't want to repress the negative feelings. You want to fully feel through those too. And I've referenced a video before on a live that talks about the difference between vibration and frequency, and she differentiates the two, saying that one of them is like how you feel in the moment, and the other one is like how much shadow material have you processed. And so if you're always trying to suppress that shadow material that you need to process, it's going to make you, that is your spiritual growth. So that's going to make your life difficult. So it's not just about feeling good all the time. And that is a drawback of, you know, just listening to Abraham Hicks material, because you can develop that misunderstanding. You just need to feel good all the time, which is not true. So she talks about getting too specific. So like, oh, this specific person, like I felt really good with them during this period, but sometimes they do. But then when you think about that, and that makes you feel good for a minute or two, but then it comes to mind something they did that really hurt you, and then it brings that up, and then you get all upset about that, and you get drawn into this whole story and this whole, all these thoughts that make you feel bad. So like initially you felt good, and then you just feel worse. Well, she says when you get too specific about the story, and you come up with these reasonable thoughts with flawed premises, that kind of drags you down. So she says, go general, just focus on something else. So we've talked about this before, like creating ease in your life. Or rather, maybe this is a common theme for, you know, the different people that I talk to, and always talking about like creating more ease in their lives and working towards that. But it requires a lot of arguments and words and effort and action to keep you alive. Not just keep you alive, but keep your identity. Maintain your identity and keep that identity intact. So if your identity is someone who has 6 figures, and then you get sick, it feels like a crisis, almost like you're going to die, because sometimes that identity, it has to fall apart for you to realize that that's not you. Yeah, so she talks about vibrational frequency. So it's like struggle, struggle, struggle. I experienced this so much because I had so many thoughts that were self-destructive, where I had so many thoughts that went over and over and over in my head, which constantly criticized me. And I thought this was helpful. I thought this was necessary, but it made me feel awful. And then I'd end up not having confidence in myself to pursue opportunities that I was definitely qualified for. Did not see the results in my life that I wanted, did not feel worthy. It's ridiculous. And then it's just struggle, struggle, struggle. So you've got all these arguments inside your head between what, like this belief about what's true, like I have to constantly criticize myself. No, you don't. And it's actually hurting you. And there's this survival-focused mentality where you're stuck dealing with these same issues and lower levels of ego development. And you're counting on your action and effort to make things happen. Well, that can work sometimes when you're in alignment with yourself. But what I was doing, my belief, I didn't have any belief, and I thought, well, I'll just put action and effort in, and almost as if the action, effort, I needed that to justify my existence. Like I'm no good if I don't put in enough effort and action. And that was damaging. So, there's some, maybe you don't connect to the language that Abraham Hicks uses, but the concepts can be quite relatable. So being in alignment with yourself talks about yourself as source, pure positive energy, worthiness, being clear-minded, healthy, full of vitality, willing to let go of thoughts that separate you from that. And of course, stress creates sickness. I'm a firm believer that all life is nothing more than a mass of frequencies. Humans have differing wavelengths, as do all frequencies, which is the number of vibrations per given distance. Yeah, that's mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling to think that it's kind of amazing. And that's so crazy, because we conceptualize all these frequencies as a desk, as a chair, as a room. And our minds are kind of structured in a way where we're not able to almost go back and see the source code of those frequencies. Yeah, so being willing to let go of any story that says you can't enjoy pure positive energy, health, and vitality. Reach for the best feeling thought you can find in whatever subject is active. This is hard. It takes so much practice. And being in the vortex is equivalent to being in the energy that creates worlds. So thus references our creative power. And of course, this video doesn't explain the mechanics or what's going on there, so it's not specific in that way. One person who is in alignment with that energy is more powerful than millions who are not. So David Hawkins said something similar as well. Being in tune with yourself and your surroundings may well offer opposing frequencies that will deliver unrest unknowingly. Yeah, absolutely. That's like being like a radio, or receiving frequencies and then connecting to those frequencies that you're on the same level as. Yeah. Reach for the best feeling. Bridging thoughts. Locate the dysfunction, the flawed programming, and decide on the next better thought. Yeah, this takes a lot of awareness. Doobie 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 doo. Actually, the paper has a section talking about doing and being. It's like, oh, this paper has everything in it. Okay, so she mentioned step 1 in the video, and there's I think there's 4 steps, but they're not all referenced here, and I didn't have enough time to find another video. But I'm just relating what she said to what we've gone over before. So the step 1 is the pre-rational, survive, connect, control, and belong. And it's this external locus of control. So I don't have control over what's happening to me. and you're sifting through the data of your experience and deciding what you don't want and what you want, and you're complaining and just reacting to whatever is happening about you. She mentioned step 2, and I called this part of the rational stage the achieve, understand, and beginning into the harmonize stage, developing an internal locus of control, so where you can take accountability and take control of your relationship to who you really are, and tending the gap between what you're experiencing and what you want. So this sounds like starting to take accountability, and of course the next steps are releasing that. So it's like, I don't have any control, and then like, I can take on control, and then after that, releasing all control again, but in a state of coherent peace, clarity, like no worries. We need to know our transmission frequency and grow with others who are kindred frequency spirits. It definitely helps, yeah. Because, you know, let's say someone else, they're emitting a certain frequency. For you to interact with them, a lot of times we adapt ourselves to their frequency. But we can choose, no, I'm just going to let them be where they're at, I'm going to be up here, and we're not going to feel that connection anymore. We might feel some distance, but we might feel kind of gross if we bring ourselves down to where other people are at too often to fit in. Yeah, so this is about being aware of your vibrational relationship to who you are. This is very tricky. Even though like she talks about it, it's like, oh, it's simple, but it is hard. Guiding every thought to mesh with the wholeness of who you are. Becoming a deliberate thinker. And of course, this is the thing that you can't control it. You just have to become aware of it. No longer creating by default. Think, speaking, and acting on purpose, consciously instead of reactively. Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk about for that video. So on the topic of manifestation materials, everything that you experience can make up the materials of what you want to create. Now remember, when you have raw materials, so let's say you're starting an art project, you have the raw materials. Now you're putting together the separate pieces together to make up the end result. So the background here is a stained glass. So you have the different pieces of stained glass, and the artist puts them together with their creative vision and skill to create this work of art. Okay, so something that might be a manifestation material is you feel a lot of attraction to someone, but they don't have all the characteristics that you want in a partner, but you want this amazing partner. Okay, so that attraction, that's one piece of glass. That's one starting material. Now, you might think, well, I can't build this stained glass piece or this artwork because like I don't have the windows put together. Well, maybe you need to put the windows together yourself, or you don't have the flower put together, so you need to put the flower together yourself. And you have to make decisions about exactly how to construct that flower. And of course, you know, you can feel stuck and you can say, well, I have this limiting belief, right? I feel a lot of attraction to someone, but, you know, they don't have everything that I want in a partner. I want to have someone who shares the same interests and lifestyle so we can share that together. And you can have this limiting belief, well, there's no one else that I feel attracted to. And I will never feel this level of attraction to anyone else. This person will never change to become the person I want. I will always have to make sacrifices in choosing a partner, and I can't have everything I want. So that's all the resistance there, like, oh my gosh, I can't create this peace. I had a coworker suggest, like, oh, Heather, do you want to lead some yoga? I'm like, sure. And then later they said, well, yeah, but then maybe we need yoga mats, and how expensive are they? And buying them might be a limitation for some people, and maybe we can ask the company, but will the company approve to buy that sort of thing? And if they need to approve that, then what kind of measures do we put in place? And they've just felt overwhelmed by all these issues. And I actually came up with this week. Someone who's sitting beside me at work said, for his friend's birthday, they were going to book these classes for medieval weapons class. So the longsword and rapier and like these different medieval weapons. So they train you for an hour, and then they beat each other up for an hour. And I started to feel upset because I started thinking, like, I don't have any friends that I could go and do this sort of thing with, and it sounds like you need to have friends to go do this with, and I started to feel really upset. And then I remembered, in the moment, no, I can change and create my reality. Why do I need to feel upset about this? All I have to do is imagine my desired reality. So I started imagining myself really enjoying this sort of thing with friends and having fun. And I thought, that's all I need to do, just imagine it. Don't wallow in this self-pity. And I caught myself. Because that's a moment where you're basically exercising that creative power. You wallow in that self-pity, I don't have any friends, and then you're just reinforcing this idea, and then guess what shows up? I did some research and I found out that they actually offer classes individually that you can just go to, and it was cheaper. And I realized I don't even need to make friends. I could just show up and then make friends there. And I thought I could go to different classes and I could just make friends there at the classes and doing something I enjoy. And it doesn't have to be this big thing where I have to like go find people to be friends with. And I realized, oh wow, it can be simple and easy. Now do I actually want to do that? Because I could have spent a bunch of time wallowing and feeling upset for myself about doing something that I wouldn't have actually done, even if I had the opportunity to go. So there was a choice point, and I realized I could just start imagining myself having and being with the kind of partner that I want. Because automatically there's all these thoughts that can show up. No, like this isn't possible, and all these reasons. The key is noticing in the moment how actually I can just imagine having what I want, and then I'm not dwelling on all these excuses why I can't have it. So everything you experience provides manifestation material. You can pick and choose different aspects of your experience and think about it as a piece of art. You know what it feels like to have those different aspects, and you have the creative power to imagine those aspects coming together, just like an artist imagines taking the raw materials and creating a piece of art out of them. And if you're having a lot of negative resistance, negative thoughts about that idea, then just shift your focus. In the moment training. Yeah, exactly. Better self-love through conscious living. I create my own default. The more we know where we may falter, the more capable we are of mitigating and realigning away from negative impacts. Yeah. I am undefined, a sorcerer. Source error, a glitch in the matrix. Oh, that's fun. I like that. Aware, not software or hardware, but awareness of the infinite now moments. Great. Yeah. Okay, so we always have these choices. We could continue to listen to limiting beliefs and believe them. And again, this is something that you have good days and not so good days. So the key is, yeah, maybe someday you might be feeling really good, but some days you're not feeling so great. So it can make a huge difference to just kind of trim some of those negative cycles of thought on those days that you're not feeling so good. Because if you think about the mind, it's these neural networks, like the brain is these neural networks, the mind is these neural networks, whether or not the brain exists. And so it's like this train. So this train gets this neural groove and it gets on this track. It's over and over and over again. So each time you're pruning those negative connections and you're shifting the track, so that normally the train would go this way, you're shifting the track. So the neural groove connections prune over time. So you're creating new neural networks and new neural grooves. So the pathways, because the neurons basically operate on electricity. We have the ions, the positive and negatively charged ions that pass down a signal through the neuron. And so you've got these currents of electricity, and the path that generates thought, or so-called generates thought, depends on the strength of that electrical impulse. So you're basically just slowly guiding and kind of retraining those networks. So you can just stay stuck on the same train track, or you can listen to those limiting beliefs, acknowledge and accept them, but don't believe them. Because we have this strong connection with these thoughts and emotions, and it's very strongly tied to the experience within the body. It's all connected. It's amazing, really. So there's this, I want to say transcendence, but almost like experiencing purging and releasing that happens when any pain or protective mechanisms to avoid pain come up from those negative cycles of belief. By feeling through them and being present with them, it releases it. It can be kind of like when I was in the dentist a couple of weeks ago. I was really anxious about feeling a lot of pain, so I was paying a lot of attention, and then I was perceiving the more intense stimulation as pain. So I let the hygienist know. But then I started to relax, and I started to perceive pain not as pain, but as this tingly sensation. And so then in that part of the mouth that she was working on, I had pain for a couple of days after, because I didn't let her know that there's pain there, but then it was just my perception that had shifted. I have to really focus now to perceive that pain, because I can automatically just relax and not perceive that sensation as pain, just perceive it as being tingly. But then of course later on it bothers me, like, oh my gosh, like there's something wrong. And that's part of it. He's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to feel this pain, it's too uncomfortable. The closer you get to this pain, the more you experience it, and your perception of it shifts. It may not be pain, the sensation might shift. And you start to see, we experience all this sensation that maybe we're not used to processing. Like, our bodies are almost like this processing material for consciousness. And it processes all these like lower levels of consciousness, which we've been doing at a really rapid rate. Okay, so once you're able to feel that fully, then it's a lot easier to discard that limiting belief. Otherwise, like, those beliefs, they have a strong hold on you because you are even subconsciously avoiding feeling whatever pain is showing up. I like this concept of using our down days to trim out the neural pathways that no longer serve us. Grooves are habits. Breaking pattern is formal training for change. Yes, and that's what we forget, is that we don't get huge improvement in one day. We get huge improvement in 30 days. It takes at least 30 days to break a habit or create a new one. We get exponential improvement in 300 days. And we forget how much our variation, because we've got our average, but we've got this variation. So we're always working within that variation, and we can move up to higher levels. So we can create a new normal where we have this new normal or new capacity to feel higher levels of happiness. We're not just always trying to feel happy or feel better based on feeling stressed or worried or anxious. And we can talk about that more when we go over some of David Hawkins' work, who discusses that, where you've got all like the lower levels of consciousness, and you've got like the line in the middle, neutrality. So below neutrality, you have the roller coaster of emotions. And then you get to neutrality. Once you're able to be stable at neutrality, which feels really boring compared to the other levels, you're able to move into peace and love and just these beautiful states, which you're able to persistently embody and feel. And the mistake that most people make is they assume you can't consistently embody those states. You can, you have to. There's a lot that you have to let go of. The living being is an electrochemical nightmare. I was expecting something a little better than nightmare, but I will accept that. Our power of growth rests upon the hope that everything is going to mix and react properly and consistency. And understanding this allows us much more. I mean, we could also say an electrochemical experiment. It's a powerful tool that we're learning how to use properly and well. Understanding this allows us much more of an objective viewpoint of our actions and reactions. Okay, so what triggered this idea of manifestation materials was the situation I had with the coworker. If you don't notice, that's what I was referencing in the earlier slides, where I felt a lot of intense attraction, but I also want someone who is very athletic, does mountain biking and skiing, is financially stable and mature. So And I spent some time this week. I felt this like release from, I guess, like this energetic cord with this person that was really strong, and I was able to imagine meeting and dating someone who is really into mountain biking, and we're out there and having a good time. And that felt really good. It felt really exciting for me. And of course it's not dragons and fairies and mermaids. I'm a little scared of mermaids. But whatever is fun and exciting to you. Like we talked about earlier, like that whole article of reality shifting where people are trying to reality shift into Hogwarts. If that's fun and exciting to you, I mean, we've got people playing video games, and part of that motivation is that reality shifting. And the problem there is they're not seeing past it. Like the video game, they're kind of stuck there. They're kind of playing a video game within this, we call it like the Matrix, or a video game. The Matrix or the video game is this limited perception. And breaking out of the Matrix is like realizing that limitation in perception. No, it's a nightmare. Okay. When you're living in it, yes. And you're experiencing it directly. It's hard. It's tough, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, that dream, like that Hogwarts style dream where there was magic and I had magic, and there's just chaos because it was very, very dangerous and very scary, and people are chasing each other and no one was safe. We have, and our bodies have, incredible power. And that's like what magic is. Magic is power. So, and this power can be used badly. And so we've got these systems and programs where it's almost like people testing out their power, and it's just like this failed experiment gone badly. And we've got like all these issues with our neurological wiring that we've had to work through generations of issues. But what do you have to offer? This always is a sticking point when people describe their perfect mate. Yeah, so, and that's the thing. You want to be the match to what you want. And sometimes people do. They have this desire for a partner who will solve their problems, who will try to bring them out of the reality they're living that they don't like. So that's not a solution. You want to start to become really who you want to be and who you want to be with. It's like becoming your perfect partner. Yeah, so collecting personal experiences as manifestation materials so you can put together different ideas. For example, oh well, I won't feel attracted to someone else in the same way. Well, I did see a guy last year at a biking resort where you get on the chairlift, and they adapt it to hold mountain bikes, and you take the chairlift up to the top and you ride down. Very dangerous, very fun. And lots of men there. There was someone that I saw online that I didn't talk to. I don't think they even spoke English. Who I just passed them and I felt really intense attraction. So, you know, there's these stories that we say that like aren't true. Like, for example, the story, I won't feel attracted to someone like that again. Well, the guy that I saw in the chairlift was with some kids. So then you can make up a story, well, he's probably married and has kids. yeah, very much likely. But, you know, like, a lot of these stories are arbitrary. You can say, like, oh, just because I haven't met someone who fits and makes sense to me as a life partner, like, it's doomed and it's hopeless for me. So that's the kind of, like, oh, it's rational, but it, like, the premise is completely flawed. So there was a church elder, much older, like, but it must have been in his 70s or 80s. And so I met him and his wife at a church function. And this man had so much compassion. Like, I was struggling. I had dropped out of school and I felt like a failure. And he just had compassion for me, and I felt so loved in that moment. So that was a quality. That was a lot of maturity. And, you know, you add that into the mix of ingredients. That's a material. I had that experience. I want that experience again. And actually, I do have an example where I took an experience that I had and I said, I want that experience again, and I got it. It wasn't perfect and it didn't lead to happily ever after, but when we talk about manifestation materials, this is something interesting that did happen for me. In my early 20s, on my ski team, I was not doing well physically, mentally, emotionally. My health was just going downhill. I was very stressed. Didn't have enough money. And there was another guy on the ski team. I was sick. We were coming back from a ski race, and everyone else was avoiding me because when you're a racer, you avoid people who are sick like the plague so you don't get sick. Well, he didn't. And I felt loved. I felt kind of like this ray of sun kind of like light out from my heart. And that was the first time I experienced it. And that's so interesting because it's an experience, right? It's not something that someone did that caused you to experience that, but it's just an experience within that moment. It's not as if, like, oh, I want someone who does this and then I'll feel this way. Like, no. So I thought, when I was on a dating app a couple years ago, I thought, you know what, I want that. I want to experience that again, and I did. I met this guy who was covered in tattoos. Very scary looking. Like, I thought he had hair. It wasn't hair. It wasn't a tattoo of hair. It was a geometric tattoo on his head that I didn't look closely enough at the pictures and didn't notice, like, that's not actually hair. That's a tattoo that went from his head, down his neck, all the way down his arms, which he didn't have a lot of recent photos of himself. So he had a lot more tattoos when I met him in person. So I was scared at first. We went mountain biking. I was very nervous. It was like kind of rainy, and when you mountain bike, when it's kind of rainy, it's dangerous. I did slide off a bridge. I was okay though. At that point, you just you let your pride get out of the way. You're just thankful that you're okay. It's a little embarrassing, but that's fine. But it's funny, after that, I did notice that kind of like sun and ray coming out of my heart by the end of it. And I thought, like, what happened? And then I thought back about what happened, and he did small little gestures that I didn't even notice at the time that were really considerate. So I only saw him one more time, and he's like, I gotta go back to Europe, because he liked to travel around a lot, and he was stuck because of the pandemic. So went back to travel the world again and be a free spirit. So it wasn't happily ever after, but you know, you can decide, like, I want to experience that, and it can just show up and happen without you realizing, without you trying to make it happen. So another manifestation material, so peers from when I used to ski race who are married now. So there's someone who was in my cohort who I used to race with who's married now. She's someone who cross-country skis and is athletic and has a good job and is very good looking. So like those are all the qualities. So like, you know what, I have felt jealousy, but I could go the other way and say, wow, that person, they're married to someone like that. I can be married to someone like that too. So it's really a level of perspective. We can kind of choose what perspective we want to have. Okay, so all I have left is looking at the developmental levels paper. This is true romanticism, often counterfeited and rarely genuine. Yeah, so true romanticism. So this idea of kind of the perfect person is going to fit this kind of stereotype of what they'll look like, and like these kind of qualities that are perpetuated through media. And the truth of it is that those people that look like that, you could try to have a relationship with them that would be deeply unfulfilling, because there's not a connection at the different levels, the emotional and spiritual and psychological levels. Otherwise, you could have someone who fits that connection at those deeper levels, but looks on a physical level nothing like what you imagine. So this is something that I discovered. So it doesn't necessarily matter whether the scenario or the person exactly fits what you think it needed to really give you what you want, right? If you really want emotional fulfillment in a relationship, a really strongly emotionally fulfilling relationship, they might not look like the perfect way that you imagined. And they might not have all the qualities that you want, but they might have other qualities, and you might be able to find ways to work around these other things. Everything can turn out to be a benefit. Now, how does this work play into your manifestation materials? You take your manifestation materials, you construct in your mind what you want it to look like. Now, whenever you're an artist, you have a vision for what you want your work, the end result, to look like. Now, the end result never ends up as beautiful as you imagine it to in your mind. So when we create and imagine and put ourselves into a situation where we're imagining this beautiful scenario, now when we manifest it, often it doesn't look the same. It doesn't mean it doesn't hold the same essence. So even if your artwork doesn't look as beautiful as you imagine in your mind, the essence of it, the energy of it can still be portrayed in a strong way. And some artwork that is very imperfect, but it has a strong energy, strong impression, can be really beautiful. So what we're really going for is the essence. And if you have a certain image in your mind, you can go ahead, idealize that, and if it inspires you, imagine it, and release your attachment to things looking or going a certain way. Because when you're in this situation, will be able to recognize, you know what, I really like what's happening here. Oh, you meant, yeah, so oh yeah, so if you watch Home Math, and his videos, he talks about how women have this hypergamous tendency. So we've got this scenario socially where women are able to economically better themselves, but they're always looking for mates who have a better financial situation than they do because of this instinct to acquire resources for security, because that biological wiring and that drive is for security, because when you're pregnant, you're very vulnerable and you really need that security, both for your own safety and for the safety of your children. So now that shows up whether or not you have children. Right, so when you're thinking about the statistics like that, you can take them into account. Be realistic. I was gonna say, recognize when the difference where you're just looking at the data and being realistic, and where there's an emotional connection and attachment to what that represents for you. This relates to like the relationship grid that we saw earlier. When I went back and read the original source material, when you're getting up into the individualist stage and the one above that, the hippie stage, so the achiever and the understander stage, achievement and understanding stage, a lot of people are ending up single. Because you get this dynamics of like women being like, I don't need men, and really developing their independence. And we're seeing a lot of that showing up in our society now, and so we're ending up with this situation where a lot of more people are single. And I was like, oh. Yeah, so I mean, if that's something you want to focus on, you can. But then again, that's part of what you don't have control over. And that's where your decision lies. Do I want to focus on going back to earlier, the reality shifting? So they say, like, what's the point of imagining yourself being in like a Hogwarts reality? And so I had a friend who used to dirtbag, and he would imagine himself winning competitions. And I thought, well, that's not, are you actually going to do the work to become that? I don't, like, you're not. But it just made him feel good. And so, like, this is kind of part of the principles that we're talking about here, where I had this negative mindset where I was like, well, why would you bother? But then in my life, I really struggled where I was really focused on negative things. Otherwise, this guy, he found an amazing, beautiful partner, and he has his first child now. So I thought later, well, maybe he knew what he was doing. Oh yeah, so you're talking about women want a strong, tall, rich, good-looking man that makes more money, but she still wants her own money and offer little in return because they haven't healed. So offer little in return because they haven't healed. I mean, so that's referencing someone still in the survival stage who hasn't reached the achiever stage yet. And of course, wants her own money, that's the achiever stage. And yeah, these other physical attributes, like they're talked about so much in romance, movies and novels. And the truth about that is someone who fits those physical characteristics isn't necessarily going to be wonderful to be around in real life. I had a friend in college who exactly matched these physical characteristics and basically had a cloud of women surrounding him most of the time. And whenever I was around him, I felt empty. So sometimes people will, they'll put up with these kind of things because they're really attached to those things. But I mean, the kind of situation that you're talking about, if you're talking about the top 10%, or even more likely the top 1%, because you're talking about someone who has these very specific physical characteristics and makes a lot of money, so that's probably like the top 1% we're talking about, like Adam Levine. And in that top 1%, most of those men are polyamorous, so you're going to have to share. So, there's the drawback. So that's where it comes to personal choice, and I've heard different people talk about that. And yeah, people are making all these different decisions, and you have to make the decision that's best for you. Of course, everyone has all these different challenges in life. And some of those things are just things that you don't have control over, so you can be aware of them, but if you're going to be focusing on them exclusively, like, they can really, really get you down. You're not leaving room for that hope and belief. So there's that balance. You want hope and belief, and you also want it balanced with reality. So I'm working on that hope and belief, because I don't want to be self-sabotaging. So I can basically be self-sabotaging myself because I feel like I have to constantly put myself down, and then not take advantage of opportunities, like, for example, in my career. So I'm trying to have that optimism and hope and belief, but I also have this pragmatism where I got a degree in tech. So that's a good paying career, because I wanted my life to be easier. And I personally think that it's important to have this balance in your life. And given your circumstances, you're gonna have to figure out how you want to create that balance. So let's say you have really high expectations for what you want in a partner. The conclusion of that is, well, you might end up being alone. You might end up being single the rest of your life. Are you okay with that? So it's like that risk reward. When you're investing, you invest this money. It's possible that you could lose that. Are you okay with losing that money? Because that's a possibility. And I've got a video that I haven't posted yet, that I'm going to be posting that talks about this a little bit. That, we have all these choices. Most people with these characteristics are empty. Vanity is their sole purpose, not their latest squeeze. I finally figured out that I sure can't fix anyone. I'm a solid support system for a lot of folks, but very few desire to respond in kind. Yeah. Absolutely. So just those physical characteristics, and it's such a disservice to focus on those. And of course, it happens for both men and women. But yeah, they don't lead to emotional fulfillment. And if you're expecting someone who has that appearance to give you that, that's what I've learned, like, it just doesn't necessarily happen. And it may be someone who has those appearance. That appearance has none of the other characteristics that you want. But, right, you being happy and excited about your life, by focusing on those things that put you in that state, that just alone makes you receptive to the situations and people who are open to having you in their life. So whether you believe in manifesting or not, having that belief and optimism and doing things and focusing and thinking on things in a way that allows you to nurture that faith and optimism in a realistic way, that puts you in the right state of mind to where that's possible. Okay, so just gonna go over the PDF. Okay, so the part that I wanted to look at in here is where it shows how you can be accessing different levels at the same time. So I'm just going to find where that is. It's unfortunate there's no table of contents. I'll probably go over the 3 levels of representation that I mentioned before. Okay. Okay, so the 3 levels of representation include, oh, this is the different one. I thought it was like the rational and the transrational. It's just because the font was too small. Okay, we'll look at this later. This is a little bit more complex, because it talks about like the first person, second person, third person's perspective, etc. So we'll just need more time to go over this. Okay. Okay, so it looks like the top half you can see all of the text. Okay, so we're talking about the human development evolving in a spiral fashion. So with increasing growth and maturity, the spiral broadens to include new information and cognitive capacities, as well as new ways of seeing the self. At each level, old experiences and dilemmas are being reworked and mastered in new ways. At each level, old experiences and dilemmas are, from a constructivist perspective, what changes are not the basic challenges that human beings encounter in life, but the relationship to these challenges that a person can have. Similar topics are revisited, yet approached with increasing capacity for perspective taking and with more resources available to deal with them. So we mentioned this before about the spiral. You encounter the same kinds of challenges in new wrapping paper, but you have an increased ability and capacity to deal with them and increased awareness of the problem, and you can deal with it with more ease and grace. It hurts more but bothers you less. So sometimes the challenges also grow. So despite the overall evolutionary directionality of development, so we talked about levels, and there's like lower levels and higher levels, it doesn't mean you move from one level to the next level to the next level. The truth of the matter is that individuals move in all directions. Adult meaning makers may remain in a steady state or in a plateau for a number of years, or even a lifetime, right? The people who just never grow, they just stay the same. They may expand horizontally and add new capabilities at the same level they are already inhabiting. They may transform vertically to new ways of seeing reality, and they can regress to earlier meaning-making stages. Okay, so here is the diagram. So we have green. I believe the green is related to the achiever stage. We have the orange, which is a lower survival stage, and then we have the bluey. I think that's related to the understanding stage. So you can move up vertically. You can be working through and basically embodying different states at different times, but you may be mostly in a specific state. So you can be moving upwards, and you can also be expanding yourself within a certain stage. So this is definitely more complex than it looks like at the first glance. So the MAP test identifies the center of gravity. We define the center of gravity as that level of ego maturity to which a person has consistent access to under ordinary circumstances, without special support conditions, or without unusual stress. So that's basically the level that you're at most of the time. So basically how you're perceiving and interacting with reality most of the time. The measured ego maturity stage is the one that a person reliably and routinely uses in response to everyday life. At the same time, we have never encountered a distribution of responses that was narrower than 3 levels. So people span even more than 3 levels. Often the responses span over 4 or 5, and sometimes, but rarely, over the whole range of possibilities. For healthy, advanced ego development, we expect flexible access to a broad range of responses across the stages, not just late-stage material. Most growth in adulthood seems to occur within a given stage, variously described as lateral or horizontal development, or translation in Wilber's terminology. The current way of viewing the self and reality is refined, enriched, and modified to include more diverse domains, more context and detail, and to establish more connections among them. We learn new skills, new methods, new facts, and even new ways of organizing knowledge. The later the stage, the more room for such horizontal expansion exists, while the current stage or mental model of the world remains the same. Although rarer, upward vertical development can occur throughout life. In that case, the whole previous meaning system is transformed and restructured into a new, more expansive and inclusive self-theory and theory of the world. It is estimated that it takes about 5 years to move up to a new level if circumstances are favorable and the person is open to change. It takes minimally a year of a well-designed developmental program for some participants to shift to a new level. So a study shows that some people, they need to a program to help their development needs to be targeted a step or two above for where they're at, for them to have some change. So that's interesting. Okay, so that's a segment of the paper that we'll be looking at more. And I'm hoping to find more information to flesh out these like these areas and levels of development. Adopting a procedural approach to healing can illuminate growth progress. Yeah, you need to develop those habits. I was, while I was reading that, I was thinking about what you said earlier about, so like the paradigm in the argument, women are choosing or trying to aim for those, like that top 10% or that top 1% of men. So a lot of the people that really focus on that and say that a lot tend to also say that like women over 25 are like washed up or have no sexual market value. And of course, I'm over 25. So, like, you have to take that into perspective. That regardless of statistics, people still manage to be on the outliers, or not even in the central. Like they can be a couple standard deviations away from the center and still not quite be on the far outliers. So when we talk about statistics and data, some of it may not be the most reliable for what you're creating and what you want in your life, or you think about your capacity. And you know, that's why you want to choose about like what thoughts are you thinking about, what are you focusing on, what information do you want to give a lot of credence to. So I'm not going to worry that I don't have any sexual market value and that's going to negatively affect my future. Yeah, absolutely. Like people's voices can affect you. Like there's so much that can be really attractive about people that you discover in your life. So reality and your life, it can be a beautiful experience. It can be this playground. And we are very used to perspectives that are very cynical, that are very pessimistic. And while you do need to be grounded, you need to be realistic. And there are definitely people who need to develop that. For me personally, I have been very focused and very diligent about, you know, developing those different parts of myself and making good choices. And what I really need to move into, and I'm really working on, is expanding that consciousness. So I've been working on the details of my life, but I'm also working on developing this nuanced, expanded perspective of reality. And yeah, sometimes that can border on something that looks like delusional. We're taking that into consideration and not basing decisions off of that, but just allowing ourselves to imagine and explore. So for example, like you say you have a dream and there's this certain thing that happens in a dream, and you say like, well, that means like I need to move to this place, and then I'll meet the person, the specific person. So when you are really attached to symbols, to signs, really attached to, well, this happened, or should I do this, should I do this? So that is not realizing how you create a lot of your reality, not realizing how you can decide, and how the mind constructs all this meaning. You can decide what meaning you want to add to and construct with. So that's a lot of the discussion that we had within this series and within this topic about deconstructing the meanings that you apply and shifting your focus to maybe applying different meanings. So you can take this in a very practical approach that seems like very subtle and nuanced, and you can also take this in a bigger, like wild kind of approach where you're imagining like full-on different realities, which seems fun. And right, so there's this balance of common sense and then creativity and imagination and exploration. This week, dreams have been off the hook. Contemplative, abstract, yet informative. Yeah, like I've been having really interesting dreams. Okay, so that's it for this week. So we'll be talking about the similar topics next week, but it'll just have a different title. So thank you so much for joining, and have an awesome week. Bye.